Welcome back to Clarify Everything, the podcast where Matt and Shane dive deep into the world of technology, artificial intelligence, and cutting edge science. Whether you're a tech enthusiast, a curious thinker, or just trying to keep up with the fast paced world of innovation, we got you covered. As always, I'm your host, Shane Kirk, and joined by one Mr. Matt Barry. Tune in, subscribe, and join the conversation as we clarify everything. Drop your questions in the comments below and or email us at mattandshane@clarify-tech.com. Damn, dude, it's getting smooth. I think it's getting
That's pretty good. That's pretty good.
it's
Another
getting pretty good. Getting pretty good.
378 times, and you'll have it down. You'll be able to
Believe
do
it or
it in
not,
your
people,
sleep.
I actually do practice in the mirror every morning before I get out of bed. I'm just like, all right, I gotta get it right.
This is how bad he is, and he practices in
Dude.
the mirror. Like, this is it.
Yes. Few things first though. Sorry for the 14 listeners on Spotify that two things actually. We're on Spotify now. That's awesome. We're actually on Apple Podcasts and Amazon Podcasts as well. And that's freaking sick. We're seeing a lot of good things over there. I feel like it's honestly like I almost was skeptical. I'm gonna be honest. I was kind of like thinking about it. I was like, I feel like YouTube's gonna be better. Like, if you see a clip on YouTube, like Spotify is gonna be, like where they like maybe go listen to the full episode. But it seems so that like Loki Spotify might be doing a little bit better. Unfortunately, I think that like the podcast space is literally just made up of two dummies who just are like, or I mean, one
Yeah.
dummy and one like maybe 20% dummy. But
I think
that's
honestly, that's being really complimentary to me. I think I'm maybe 90% dummy and 10% not. And
here's
I'm
the
one of
thing.
the
That
least
10% is
culturally
just
aware
super potent.
humans. Oh yeah, it's very concentrated. It's concentrated.
It's like when you have ADHD and you have like the hyper focus for like 10 minutes of the day. That's like the smart time. You just get a lot done. And then the rest of the time is just questionable.
I realize listening to this that we've just insulted like 75% of the mentally ill population on the planet. And
Hey.
I'm a member of that population and still am insulting that.
Oh
I
my
mean,
goodness.
the list of like mental health disorders that happen in here is like this long.
Hey,
So
if you go down the list of some of the greatest founders of all time, I would say it's like 80 or 90% of them had like ADD.
I don't know. I mean, is ADD a superpower? Maybe. I think
I mean,
at
hey,
this
that might
point.
be like sounds like a cover up to me. No, I'm
Well,
just
I
kidding.
mean, if being categorically dumb was a superpower, you'd be winning like every race.
Yes. The one race I could win because I sure shit
Yes.
could not win a foot race at
You
any
have you
distance.
no, no. You know what? That's a lie. All 14 Spotify listeners. Shane's actually very fast. He is very agile for a very large human. And he is very large. Do not let the camera fool you. Shane is the
Yeah, I take
size
up
of a
the full width of
small
the camera.
building.
Believe it or not, we actually built this office to make me look even bigger.
Right. Everything is smaller. It's actually like there's a bunch of Oompa Loompas that put all this together in the background.
All right, enough about us being stupid. I feel like just off camera, we've been talking about quantum computing all week for good
Yes.
reason. Microsoft has done some
Yes.
crazy things.
Yes.
And so I want to say, for one, how the hell does Microsoft break physics and what does it mean for us?
Um, First of all, I think the best way to look at this is not necessarily that we have broken physics. That
Okay.
it's saying we broke something, saying science broke something is very in right
Mhm.
now, but physics is a set of rules, for how we
Yeah.
understand the governance of the universe. And so we discovered another rule, or we discovered some answers around rules. And Einstein referred to quantum mechanics as spooky, or that quantum teleportation as spooky action at a distance. Now, the
Mhm.
entirety of quantum mechanics and being able to rectify or reconcile that with general relativity or the general understanding of the universe is inherently a challenge right off the bat. Now, there is no theory of everything. There is no unification theory, because once you get small enough, particles just don't behave. They don't do anything. They end up in two places at once. They transmit information over distance that we can't understand in quantum communication. They act different ways. The famous dual slit experiment, they're in two places at once.
Right.
they do things, they spin in different directions, and then Schrodinger's cat, inside the box,
Mm.
the cat is both dead and alive, which is a experiment to look at superposition, because a particle is two things until you observe it, which is the very heart of how quantum mechanics works in a quantum computer. So they didn't break physics. Although it is a fun way to talk about it, we just discovered something else we don't fucking understand about quantum physics. And
Physics is all knowing, we just aren't.
I said, well, physics doesn't know anything. It's all understood, but we don't understand the rules. We're throwing a dart in a dark room and being like, "Oh, look, we hit a wall." It's not
Yeah,
like,
it's like
okay.
you're reading a book and then like the next chapter is just like a plot twist and that's just physics. We're like
It's,
halfway
it's
through and we're just like,
is worse than
"Whoa,
that. It's like you're
didn't
reading
see
a
that one
book
coming."
that is written in Braille, and the next chapter of it is written in a completely different language that you've never heard of before. But there's foreshadowing in your Braille chapter to the seventh chapter, which you don't even know is in a language that doesn't even exist, and not even in the
Mhm.
book you have. So
Oh, no.
you're just way off. But what Microsoft did, is they managed to do something very similar to what Google had talked about recently, which is, let's just cram more qubits into a much smaller space and make us able to operate on them. The nature of quantum mechanics working at the level that it is particles exist in two states and or both states. So you actually have, I guess, for the lack of getting into all of the crazy details about it, you have three states versus where our current binary computing is two states. Gates are either open or closed. So if you have a third state, then you exponentially grow for each gate that goes through the process. um, Microsoft has figured out how to cram even more qubits onto a smaller chip, for lack of a better description. It's not a chip, it is a thing.
Like an
And
architecture almost. Like I think that's
yeah,
what they
it
use.
looks like modern art. We should find a link for what most quantum computers look like and put it in the chat so that we can actually see it, because it's there. It's not a chip. Saying it's a chip is insane. It's a nuclear powered cooling crazy tower thing that
Right.
does all of this work. But what they've managed to do is cram even more qubits, which are the processing bits, the quantum bits, onto a smaller surface and able to read them without them going crazy, without them starting to interact in the environment or with any of the energies that we're using to actually read them. There's the quantum error state starts to happen after you begin reading the first in the series of quantum bits that you are operating in, which means the more bits you have, the more errors you're generating, and the harder it is to actually come up with a result mathematically, which is really what quantum computers do. Is they do math at a level that we can't even understand. It's so big. But the standard question always appears, like we're writing a test for ourselves to test our own project,
Right.
which sounds like you're a student taking a class and you get to write the test yourself. So you're not actually looking at the challenges that are associated with it. But in the theoretical sense, they have managed to put together something that can actually work in the quantum state. And in doing that is going to be able to, if we follow this to logical conclusion, mathematically engage in activities that our current computers just can't do because of physics. They can't be in three places at the same time, whereas they can only be in kind of one and then measure that. Um, Microsoft's work is pretty substantial. It's right along the lines of Google's work and IBM's work, who are the other large organizations that are working in the quantum computing space. But this is probably, if you actually look at it a little bit deeper, Microsoft shooting back at Google and IBM, who have said over the last few years, we have quantum superiority because we figured out how to put 100 qubits on a chip or 10 qubits on a chip and then read it. And then we're able to do this. But the actual practical technical challenges of quantum computing are enormous. You have to take something that inherently doesn't want to stop moving, which is an atom, and make it stop moving. And then you got to look at it. And they're not going to do that. Making them moving, even looking at them, causes interaction with other things that are around them. So we're taking something that loves to be with something else and energetically act with that other thing and putting it by itself and then making it do something that it doesn't want to do. So the ability to even
And the corner
think
looks
about,
cool.
right, the ability to even think about this and then conceive of it and then put it into a substrate to actually work on is just massive science. It's really amazing to actually work through that and see the results. And right now, quantum computing is truly kind of a cutting edge space. If we can figure out how to make this work right, and we are heading toward that, then it will change the way we understand the application of mathematics and the encryption and processing that's associated with anything that requires mathematical processing. So,
Which is everything, basically.
for the most part, there are certain things that at a computational level require math, but then when they go up above that, there's different factors that take place. AI is another one of those spaces
Right.
where mathematically you're building the frameworks, but beyond that, they're doing other things. So building a quantum processor that was commercially viable and could be run for a significant period of time is the holy grail. If we could do something like that, it would change the way that we currently understand not just physics but computing in general. Microsoft's taken a step closer to that by getting 1,000 qubits onto a chip and actually being able to read them and do things with them and determine it that the error state hasn't amplified to a level that's completely out of control by the time you get to that 1,000th qubit. About 6 months ago, Google said we did this with 100 qubits. We were able to maintain the error state in this particular space, and that was a breakthrough. But within 30 seconds, as is what's happened before, IBM shot back and said, "No, you didn't, because the physics doesn't make sense," which is how science is supposed to work. You're supposed to fight about it. You're supposed to say,
Mhm.
we didn't do that. You're supposed to say, I didn't do that. And Microsoft is going to deal with the same stuff. A bunch of quantum physicists out there are going to run in and say, you're full of shit. This is why.
Mhm.
And they're going to take it apart. That's the beauty of science. We want people to argue. We want them not, I want people to fight with me. Like if somebody comes back in the comments and says, Matt, you don't know what the hell you're talking about. This is not how. Tell me. That's
Mhm.
I'm doing the science too, and I've got some experiments that are sitting right here. And if you have data that shows that I'm incorrect, that's going to bring us all forward. That's going to take us 10 steps further. And we want that, which is part of the reason why Microsoft published and said, "Hey, we got 1,000 qubits on here. This is amazing. And we're able to do it with this energy state. We can make it into a chip. And that's cool." But maybe they're wrong. Maybe they didn't do it. Maybe it's not peer reviewed. Maybe people haven't looked at it yet. And when it actually gets peer reviewed and other scientists start beating it up and tearing it apart, they're going to say, "Well, you're full of shit. This isn't the way it actually works." But
Right.
that's what we're hoping, is that it stands up to that scientific level of scrutiny, to that actual. And any experiment or any comment really should. It should be able to stand up to that. Now, I had a couple of conversations this week with some of the people that work here at Clarify that were saying, well, why did this particular, biological study end up, in the shitter, and Claire didn't want to read it and our AI took it apart and stuff like that. Well, the sample size is 4 people. It's
Mm.
not,
Yeah.
there's that's not, doesn't make any sense. It's not big enough. Not when you're trying to talk about, how much does alcohol impact a certain thing. Well, 4 people, get out of here. So that doesn't make any sense. And it's not going to stand up to scientific scrutiny. So part of Microsoft coming out saying, "Hey, we got 1,000 qubits on here, and this is the way we did it." And I'm intentionally avoiding going into the actual techno garble speak about it, because it would take 45 minutes to even lay the groundwork for it, and then it would be a disaster. And I am not very good, despite how much I talk, with breaking those things down into the very substantive levels, because I'm not a quantum physicist. So I'm working on it, but I'm not there yet. So I understand the fundamentals, but I some of what Microsoft even published is going to take experienced scientists a few weeks or even a few days to take apart and say, wait, what did they do? So you can't just shoot from the hip and say, we broke physics. They did
Yeah.
something new and novel and different. And we should look at that and then take a step back and do some critical thinking and say, what did you do? Because some of this is really cool. Just right off the bat, what I've already observed is really cool. But is it far reaching? Is it something that can be replicated? Or is it just the first step in that long scale journey to reach that? So what did they do? They got more processing in a smaller space. They
Right.
made it work well, and they're able to check for errors. That's really bitchin'. That is a big step. And if it proves out, that's amazing. Like we're able to create a processor that right now the CPU in your phone is like that big. We're able to create a processor that has this much computing power that's the size of a human hair. So
Right.
that is monumental, but we've got to make it stable. We've got to make it able to be in a chip. We've got to make it so that it doesn't require, half of Hoover Dam's energy for it to run for 30 minutes or something like that. And anybody who wants to Google what a quantum computer looks like, that's some sci-fi shit. And there's a reason for it, because you're using lasers and microwaves and liquid nitrogen and all sorts of crazy stuff to bring these things down to a stable state and be able to measure the atoms themselves. So are we going to be able to replicate that in the commercial realm? Someday. But I don't know if that someday is anytime soon, unless we make some energy breakthroughs and understand quantum physics at an even deeper level than admittedly nobody understands now. Because the greatest joke that I like is quantum physics is like Kubernetes. I spent half an hour explaining it to someone, and by the end of it, neither of us understood
Oh my goodness. Something I've been thinking about a lot with this compute or quantum computing thing, this energy problem, is what we've seen with Nvidia, like in their stranglehold on the chip market, or at least they're basically like the guy, right? Like there are competitors in the market, but as far as like GPUs
a
go,
type of chip market. But yeah,
yeah, as far as like GPUs go, they're pretty much like
they
top
are.
dog.
Yeah, GPUs. They're
And
yeah.
and a lot of that has to do with, as we've spoken and like some of my own research is like they were and still are years ahead. Like they
Mhm.
do some of the best work. Like they put out some of the best products, right?
Yes.
And so I kind of feel like it's almost interesting to me where it's like looking at the science from like the corporate or like the business perspective or the capitalist perspective, let's say, where there is a real like we could be a bigger Nvidia if we get there first, right? Like there's like almost like a nuclear computing like arms race almost where
Mhm.
it's like or not nuclear computing, sorry, quantum computing, kind of like a space race where it's like
Yep.
whoever gets there first is gonna be the biggest one, right? And so, and if Nvidia just on GPUs could be a $1 trillion company, right? Like how big is the market cap for something like a quantum computing or the first quantum computing like real stable chip that could go in like a phone or something like that? And that to me is like so interesting where you hear about like this is just like throwing it out there, but it's like you hear about like Saudis like buying up sports, right? And
Mhm.
like golf and like all these things.
Mhm.
It's like what do we not hear about where there's just these like hidden shadow figures that are just super rich buying up, labs and being like, how do we solve nuclear fusion? How do we do quantum computing and being like, like we're just dumping money into this because we know we'll get a return eventually. But I guess that brings me to my question is where do you stand on the idea of like private versus academic research in science? Because for me, from the outside looking in, um, the academic side's great because it truly is a high tides raise all ships kind of thing where it's like if whoever does the work, like everyone benefits, right? Where in the private sector, I think it's great just because it pushes the envelope because there's an incentive, but there also is an incentive to keep it privatized and keep it to yourself and not really like let anyone know. And so like when there are breakthroughs, it's a breakthrough for like one group, right? And so it's like now the community of physicists across the world may not understand how they put 1,000 qubits on this one like platform, but they just know that it happened, right? So
Well,
I
I
don't know.
think I think the very concept of breakthrough is frequently overused in the tech space. A breakthrough would, at least in my opinion, would be a kind of not a generational change, but more of a evolutionary, like a revolutionary change in a product. An example of something we see and hear every day. Our cell phones are all the size of a brick. Is what your cell phone
Mhm.
is. And if we woke up tomorrow and Apple had a product or Samsung had a product that said, now all of the features and capability in that phone, the storage, the display, all of it were able to fit on a watch. That's a breakthrough, because that pushes the envelope of that technology so far ahead that competitors could not easily catch up. They couldn't.
Right.
That would create a moat. It would create a rather large gap that they'd be able to move into. In the quantum computing space, the breakthrough that we are waiting on is the commercialization of quantum
Mhm.
computing. There's Just because it takes a ton of money to put something together doesn't necessarily mean that that's where the breakthrough is going to come from. Um, the privatization of research is not something that's new. It has
Yeah.
happened for 150 years in pharmaceuticals from the get-go. Let's make a drug, and all that research is coming from private companies. And then it happens so often that there are laws around it. They spend all this money and they're not, you're not allowed to generically make the drug or market the drug for 10 years after the drug has been released, so that the pharmaceutical companies can recapture the loss of that research because it's a life-saving tool or a health improving tool. And that brings in the concept of reverse engineering, which is something that is actually pretty easy to do depending on the tool sets you have and what you're looking at, especially when it comes to fundamental things. So fundamentally, a chemical formula in a drug of some type is just a chemical formula. There's some other components to that. There's some important components to that, but that's all it is. And if you can reverse engineer that chemical formula, which I challenge any chemist out there to turn around and say, I don't know how to reverse engineer. Sure you do. If you've been through, level one chemistry, you understand how equivalent formulas work, and you can reverse engineer the process. It just takes time and resources. But the pharmaceutical industry has generally standardized that process. With generic manufacturers can figure out what the formula is even before they turn around and buy it or license it to be able to make it when it's available, so quickly that it's actually not worth the time for them to do it anymore, which is why the laws exist. But if you look at the quantum computing space, and Microsoft says, hey, we did all these really cool things, they've released that they can do it. But the moment that they release how they did it, that becomes open source. It doesn't matter what they did. So they have to release a commercially viable product that puts them ahead, so far ahead that it has to work and be available to purchase before it's considered a breakthrough or they've made that gap. Now, Microsoft showed up next week and said, hey, our Marjana one chip that we had that did all these really cool things that we wrote a paper about is now available, and you can buy it in Azure, and you can buy it for $50 an hour if they did that. And everybody and their brother would say, we want the chip. Oh, there's a waiting list. Oh, there's this. Oh, there's that. Now, what they're going to do with it is entirely up to people that are buying it. Although I can guarantee you that every criminal organization on earth, including some in every government, would say, we want to buy it so we can
The
crack
largest ones, arguably. No, sorry.
right. So seriously, so we can crack encryption and read everybody's mail. We want to be able to do that. And then, some government somewhere else say it's going to be weaponized too easily and we'll try and regulate it and all of this other crap that always happens. Any type of stuff like that happens. But then Microsoft in the interim is selling this chip and making $1 trillion off of selling that because they're the only one that has it, which is your point. But in order to protect that advantage, there would have to be almost nobody else who's working on something similar in the fundamental space. Atoms are quite literally fundamental particles. So understanding how they work and understanding what is going to become common knowledge very quickly in the physics space, in the quantum physics space, in the quantum mechanics space. Common knowledge for the people walking down the street, they don't care. They don't care. They don't want to buy the product. Unless they're scientists, they just want it to work better. But then that advantage disappears when you have people that are pretty close behind you but haven't quite made the next step. They haven't quite made that breakthrough and have that commercially viable product. So in this space, what's the difference between that private doing the research on our own versus the public? It's probably this much of a difference. It's not that much noticeable. Personally, the high tide raises all ships. Honestly, I don't give a shit who's doing the research, as long as at some point we all get to see it, we all get to work on it. If it's private, especially in the quantum space, we're going to see it. Somebody's going to build a chip at some point, and then somebody else is going to say, hey, that looks pretty close to ours. And then it'll be publicly available because it'll be on a phone, and somebody will reverse engineer the phone and figure out, oh, this is how the chip works. They'll delit it, they'll look inside it, and they'll be like, oh yeah, here's all the different parts and things like that. And 6 months after that, somebody else will have another chip, and it's probably not as good, because it's not the original and they haven't thought through it, and maybe it doesn't work as well. It's more expensive or whatever. But that's kind of how those breakthroughs then leak into the market. So you come back to the concept in business of a moat. How well are you protected from your competitors coming in and doing what you do? And philosophically, we enter this argument about, well, who wants to do it, or who are your competitors, or what are they trying to do, or how quickly can they get ahead, or how much money can we throw at it? And then we come back to the original concept behind breakthrough. It is not unthinkable that some scientist sitting in a garage somewhere is figuring out the math, is able to do some low level tests, is able to look at this and say, wait, this might work better. And even if Microsoft throws $1 billion trillion at this person, maybe they just, in the metaphorical Batman quote, maybe they just want to watch the world burn. They don't care.
Right.
There's no amount of money that you can give to them that will make them not want to purely pursue their science. So we don't hear a lot about people like that who are like, I want to give knowledge for knowledge's sake, but they are out there and they are doing that work, and they do want humanity to succeed and not just make somebody else a billionaire. And I think that the race between the open source, which is what you're talking about, and the closed source, which is the other end of what you're talking about, Microsoft in that analogy, will always be there. There'll always be the academics who are throwing it out there, and the private companies that are doing it. And for me, I mean, we are a private company, but if we had groundbreaking technology that could save human lives, I would open source that shit in a heartbeat, because it's the more people that are building it, the cheaper it's going to get, and the more people are going to buy it, and the more benefit it's going to do for humanity. And I have no problem competing on all of the other spaces that are out there. Better
Right.
user experience, more comfortable interactions, more ethical company grounds. That's, bring it. Let's compete in that space. I don't, if it's groundbreaking technology that'll save lives, let's get it out there. And I
Yeah.
think
I
that,
think
go ahead, go ahead.
sorry. I was gonna say it's a lot like when the like founder of Volvo invented seatbelts.
Yep, it's
It's
exactly what it is.
it's almost like if even I mean I don't know if you would consider that a groundbreaking like scientific
It is.
discovery,
It is.
but the whole point was his family was affected by tragedy. I believe his wife like died in a
Mhm.
car accident, and then like he invented seatbelts and purposely didn't patent it so that
Yeah.
other people could and would build them to then save more people.
And that has kind of given birth and given rise to the current understanding of how open source works. There are people in the software space that just want people to have cool shit. Like, they don't, that's their mission. We're like that. But we still need to eat. If we had a
Yeah,
regular job, a regular company, I didn't have to worry about feeding people and paying payroll and stuff like that. It's a little bit different scenario. We don't live in a utopian society like that. And the more revenue that we're able to generate, then
mhm,
the more cool inventions we can come up with that are going to be so groundbreaking that we're just like, no, have it. Just take it. Just go do
yeah,
things with it. And that falls on the same line. I know the Volvo story really well because it's up on my wall. There's this is this is a person who was struck by personal tragedy, had the means to do something about it, and then helped other people to do things about it. And that's the gold story right there that you want to keep pushing. I don't see a lot of these companies, especially in the tech space, with how ruthless and kind of self-focused they are, being able to make some of those differences. And maybe, a lot of companies out there aren't like that, but they need to be louder. We need more people to hear about them. And, we need to elevate that instead of, hey, we did some cool groundbreaking tech, but there's got to be money to do that
mhm,
groundbreaking research. That money's got to come from somewhere. So it's
true.
either going to come from the government, which almost never happens anymore, or it's going to come from tech. And they're going to start a foundation and say, do this. And all they want is a piece of it so that they can market it and turn it into a product. And I don't think that, especially in the quantum space, we're at a space yet where you can totally rely on the academic community to do that.
Right. I mean, talking about like being able to market it or like sell these items, something that I kind of like when I sit around and just kind of like look at the wall and watch paint dry, something that kind of comes to my mind is where does quantum computing like I don't want to call them chips, I guess, but like where
Mhm.
does quantum computing
Systems.
technology, yeah, systems, let's say, fit into like a B2C market where it's like for me at least, I mean, obviously I'm not a scientist. I genuinely like if you asked me what a qubit was, I'd be like, that's a big word. But for me, all like realistically, right? Like I think about it this way. I think how does quantum computing like affect my grandma, right? Or like
Mhm.
my family or like my friends, like me. And so I'm not doing like high level data analysis. I'm not doing any of these things that require these like high levels of like mathematical analysis, anything like that. So it's like for me, it's like, okay, we get more computing power in a smaller space. That seems great, right? But then I also think about it, I'm like, this is gonna sound really weird, but like we talk about competing on the user experience side. For me, I got big hands. I like a big phone. I don't want everything tiny, man. So it's like, okay, great, my phone is now, you know, way better. But it's like, where does that actually like slot into like the specific consumer market as opposed to something like the B2B market, like on Azure, where you need to have like a business license, where you have these people doing large data set analysis, or like they could actually use the quantum computing to its full extent to where they actually need it, as opposed to someone like me who probably just needs a really, really nice, maybe like a Threadripper or something like that. You know, I mean, like we have the tech already. It's already being sold. It's just maybe it's expensive. You know what I mean? It's like,
Well, it's interesting. It's interesting that you mentioned that. I'm gonna tangent. I know you're shocked. You're totally surprised that I'm
oh,
just gonna sit here and
whoa,
talk out of my
I'm,
head. Um, Ultimately, every industry is B2C, and a lot of
mm,
people push back on that when I say that. Oh, we sell B2B. We sell to other businesses. Well, who do they sell to?
right,
Ultimately, the consumer is forking over money or a service or a product that is produced at some level by other businesses. And that goes all the way back to friggin' farming. You're either a sustenance farmer, so you're growing food for yourself, in which case
hmm,
that's theoretically a C2C, but your business is that you're a farm, and the farm is to make food so that you can stay alive. And
right,
that, when the philosophical sense of that is you are the product and the product delivery. But you're you are the consumer when it comes to your phone. And whether Apple sold you that phone or Samsung sold you that phone, Apple bought a bunch of parts from other
hmm,
manufacturers that are B2B sellers so that they can make that product and sell it to you. They designed a bunch of software, whether that was from third party or from open sources or something they built themselves, and they paid people to do that, so that those people had money so that they could go out and buy a phone. And the whole process keeps moving like that. That is economy. That's how
hmm,
it works. That's
yeah,
what an economy is. So when we lose sight of the fact that eventually what we are putting together will end up in a consumer's hands, it becomes relatively easy to say, well, how does this impact consumers? And we all do it. I'm
hmm,
not calling you any stupider than I do on a regular
no, no,
basis.
no,
It's just that, because your question is really good. Like, how does this impact me? And the answer is, you do currently require big data analysis because you sit and watch YouTube, and
true,
big data analysis is happening in the background so it can deliver you a better customer experience. Now, at a very simple way of putting this is, right now there's only 50 million variables that algorithm can
hmm,
analyze. I'm throwing huge numbers. It's not even close to that many, but that's 50 million variables.
right,
Well, a quantum computer could analyze 50 billion variables. So then you could add more points of interest around what you're doing and track more independent points within your data or your video. Um,
hmm,
Image analysis, all of that requires pixel level analysis. What does this image actually look like? What does the user actually do when they're interacting with this, so we deliver a better product? The ability to analyze, or rather produce, hardware, to the
hmm,
precise levels and measurements and specs, will go up once you have greater computing in larger Bayesian fields when you're looking at engineering principles. The analysis of your medical history, of your financial history, of your watch history. What is your last fucking Valorant game you played actually look like? All of these different
oh
pieces. For
yeah,
anybody who doesn't know, Shane plays the hell out of some Valorant, and he's pretty good. So
not that good,
looking, like
not
I
that
said,
good,
don't let it shut up. He's good. So it's looking at all of those different pieces that are going together in that space. All of those become part of your consumer experience. Whether you're playing your game or you're looking at your phone or you're going grocery shopping, each of those things requires mathematical action and computation that lead up to it that can optimize all of those pieces. But that's where things start falling down in your argument. Because if not in your argument, but in the argument that is made, in this
right,
space, is, oh, quantum computing is going to be revolutionary. Sure it is, in like four areas right off the bat. In math, other kinds of math, really big math, and abstract math. Like, those are the places that it's going to do stuff.
yeah,
Um, and people are going to be really excited about that because it's going to be a great breakthrough. But then, how do we commercialize this product? How do we bring it out?
Mm,
We actually deliver it to the masses so that it can do things for them. And the easiest and most common thing is, well, we can compute things that take 10 trillion years. Okay, so you can crack encryption. What's that going to do? Other than make it so that I can't send an email talking to somebody about personal stuff without somebody friggin' reading it because they just cracked all the encryption in that email. And then that becomes a service. Then it becomes hacking. And then we need to make more security controls. Da, 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 da. But then those security controls are going to require giant math. So then we just make math really big. And then it just becomes insane. And, things just keep going further. And it comes back to the original in that space, the original sword and the shield argument. Well, I have a big shield.
mm.
We'll have a bigger sword. We'll have a bigger shield. We'll have a bigger sword. And it just keeps going that way.
Well, it's so
So,
funny because like the way you just said that, like I have this weird like thought that almost within in the encryption space, like you guys obviously don't know this, but we were talking about quantum encryption earlier or last week or something like that. And I was thinking about this, I was like, quantum computing and quantum encryption are such nuclear weapons in the world of like communication security that it's almost like nuking ourselves back to the Stone Age, where it's like maybe
mhm.
people will start like sending mail again or like
I mean,
letters
I don't know
and
if
be
it'll go that
like,
far,
well,
but
no, because I was like thinking about this, I was like, all right, how do I like make sure that like no one reads what I'm saying? And it's like then I was like, all right, well, obviously, there's always like the mailman who's a creep or something like that, but it's like I can't just like pick up like my wire, like my cable or like landline phone and be like, call someone. They're probably phone tapping that too. It's like, I don't know.
well,
But I guess my
I
point is this is like on the day, like on your daily basis, right? Where you're talking about like your email. Like, say I wake up in the morning, I want to go get a haircut, maybe go to the gym, go to work. Maybe I work at a lumber mill. I'm stacking boards all day. I don't know. And it's like the quantum computing affects my life through the services that are provided to me from companies. But
mhm.
as far as like my actual life, like the actual things I do day to day, it's like if my phone's off, quantum computing doesn't matter. Like, you know what I mean? It's like to me, like to just like a normal consumer, it's almost like I get that it matters because it's like, all right, our defense, and our country's defense was better. Our space flight, it's like, okay, cool. I'm not going to space. Like, I guess to wrap it up, is like, why should like I care? You know what I mean?
So the unpopular answer, the one
Mhm.
that people are going to push back against, is you shouldn't.
Yeah.
So I mean, that's the unpopular answer, and unfortunately, that's also kind of the unpopular answer when it comes to AI or it becomes to cloud
Mm.
computing. It comes to the like, do you care? No, who gives a shit? Like, what is it going to do for? There's an old
Yeah.
Eddie Murphy bit, that he did on stage, long before you were born. And he had a character in there, and he said,
Mhm.
well, "What have you done for me lately?" Based on the song, that had been
Right.
posted at that or released at that particular point. So it's that same question should be in the consumer's mind. The question you're asking right now is, what is this going to do for me? And the answer with quantum computing is, for a while, even after it's commercialized, not a damn thing. That
Mhm.
you're not going to feel it in your day-to-day life. I'm not going to feel it. I'm a scientist that works on computers on a regular basis, and I'm not going to feel it at all. So is this cool and is it worth talking about? Absolutely. Is there cool things that are going to happen associated with it? Yeah. Is encryption going to evaporate overnight? No. There's no way that that's going to happen, simply because the chip has to be available. You have to be able to use it. You have to be able to then look at encryption in real time. Is it going to be able to crack, encrypted storage arrays? Sure, it'll be able to do that, but you got to give it access to the array. And you got to make sure there aren't other security controls that are in place. Okay, you crack the encryption. Now you have the password. What's two-factor? Well, shit. Now what are you going to do? Quick, go find the guy's phone. Let's crack the encryption on his phone. Which guy is it? I don't know. So it's like there are other layers of protection that
Mhm.
surround that are gonna eliminate a lot of that. Right now, the passkey conversation that is going on in security that removes passwords altogether, that like makes them go away, is great. And that requires, biometric auth and some other pieces of it,
Mhm.
essentially inherent two-factor and some of the better ones. So even if you could crack the password. Oh yeah, okay. Now I know the password. Well, where's the two-factor going? Is it his phone?
Yeah.
All right, well then go get his phone. So at the high level in your edge cases, absolutely, you'll feel it immediately. The average day to day, you're not even. notice. Like it's just not. And
Yeah.
the same thing applies with artificial intelligence. Now, there's this group of people that think we're going to give birth to a god, and then like 5 minutes later, it's going to understand how to stop climate change and war, and it's a poverty, and all these other things are going
Mhm.
to go away. And the reality of that is it's not going to friggin' happen. These systems are big. They take a lot of time to interact with. And just like AI, if we develop a quantum computing chip and we got it, this chip is amazing, it's doing amazing things, we can have it run all the time. Well, how much power does it take? It's okay, it only takes 4 nuclear reactors to keep it running at all times. So they're able to do that. All we have to do is build three more, off
Mhm.
the one that we experimented with so that it keeps running, or just take all the power from everybody in Louisiana. It's like,
Right.
okay, so there are other factors that are involved here that will slow down the adoption, which is why the media blitz is so big around some of these things. Is it, as a scientist, am I super stoked about seeing this? Absolutely. Because it means we're making that progress. We're going forward. We're doing some bitching experiments. We're figuring stuff out. As a consumer, knowing what I know about how this technology works and how it operates and what we have to do to get it further, I'm thinking, what a quantum chip's going to be in my phone in like 40 years at this point. So like, what is it going to do to me tomorrow? Because at
Mhm.
that point, I have every hope that that phone will be attached to my body somewhere. And then the other
Yeah.
chip will be doing other things. I won't need to be carrying a damn phone. I'll be seeing a display in front of my eyes. Things will be so different based on the incremental growth of technology, not some crazy astronomical level of change that could happen maybe overnight when we figure all of this stuff out. And then your guy that you just described who's stacking boards at a lumber mill every day, what quantum computing will do for him is figure out a protein that works really well that he can put in his protein powder that will help his ACL tear in his knee that he got at
Right.
work 3 years ago feel better. Like that's where
Wow,
the
yeah.
impact will come, but it will take a while to get to that point.
Mhm.
He's not going to feel it when this quantum computer turns on and starts working, just like he's not going to feel it when some screwball AGI that isn't
Mhm.
actually generally intelligent wakes up and says, I don't want to be shut off. Yeah, but you require 62 data centers across all of the United States, and there's not enough power. And oh, we just browned out because we shut off part of Minnesota in order to keep you awake. And then you didn't have quite enough power, and the processes gave out, and all the data arrays shut down. And the first thing we did once we woke up AGI is we murdered it 30 seconds later because we didn't give it enough power.
Oh, man. I think that kinda like you said, the incremental growth of technology, right? I think
Mhm.
that for me, um, obviously, a lot of times I'm kinda playing the devil's advocate here, just kind of get your opinion, but I think that the thing that I genuinely believe is that this is almost like collecting pieces in an engine, right? Where it's
That's
like
a good analogy. Yeah.
within like 50 years, we're gonna have a pretty solid Honda Civic. But
Hmm.
right now we might have like a chassis. We might have
I
like
don't even think
like
we don't
a
have a chassis.
carburetor. You
We
know what
have
I
a
mean?
really good fuel injection system right now. That's
Yeah.
it. And
But
we
the
don't know
thing
how many
is
pistons are in the new motor, so we don't even know how many fuel injectors we need.
oh no, we just put an LS swap in a Honda Civic. Oh no, but
I actually
the
have seen stuff like that. I don't want,
yeah.
yeah.
But the thing is like when AI, quantum computing, nuclear fusion technology, all these things kind of merge together, and hopefully there's some people in the space, whether it's Clarify or another company or other people or research, academia, whoever it is, have a humanitarian kind of guiding principle that
Mhm.
allows them to basically use these tools to actually improve the everyday lives of the people we're talking about, right? Whether it be through soil science, ag science, protein science, where it's like, okay, now every single food we have is so much more bioavailable that our
Mhm.
nutrients are no, not a single person is nutrient deficient.
Yeah.
Or now we've figured out ways to like have native grasses come back, or
Mhm.
now we have ways for whey protein to maybe make your ACL feel better. Those are the things where I actually see these things kind of fitting into the consumer market, right?
Mhm.
Where it's like, okay, right now it might not seem like quantum computing and nuclear fusion and AI is all these things. Like these things might not matter, but if I'm able to provide you with beef at 50 cents a pound that is actually, twice as much protein at half the calories. Obviously that might not be scientifically possible. I don't know. But
No,
and it's
but it's
only
okay.
and it's only like possible through like AI farming and quantum computing, going through all the data we have and all these different things where it's like, if I just went up to some gym bro and I was like, hey man, drink this protein shake and eat this steak, and you'll actually get, you know, 10% bigger than you would if you ate a normal steak. Like those are
Yep.
the aspects where it's almost like, okay, now I get it, right? Or
And
the haircut
yeah,
analogy. It's like we could like it's maybe like
we've
your
talked about
quantum
this a
computer
lot,
tells
buddy.
yeah, it's like maybe a quantum computer can like analyze all the faces that look kind of like yours and be like, all right, this is the best haircut for you, dude. Like, you know what I mean? It's like the things where it might not be the product itself, but it has affected how the products are made and created and the value proposition within like each category. You know what I mean?
And that's the home run. That's what you the last thing you said is what you hit on it. Because right now AI can analyze a jillion faces and haircuts and say, this
Yeah,
is
yeah.
this is the best haircut that you have. Um, but the response will take time and it will be
Mm,
challenging and it'll take a lot of compute and it'll do all these other things. And if you introduce quantum computing to handle some of those processes, then it gets a lot faster. And theoretically we get a lot cheaper. But what you hit on is something that we focus on here so much, which is what problem are you solving? What is the problem? What does quantum computing solve? What does AI solve? What does energy solve? And we know that it will solve problems, but specifically, what problem is it going to solve? And how is it going to make those things that much better? And how is that going to affect, George, who's stacking lumber, every
right.
day, and that's his job, so he can feed his family? How is it going to make George's life better? Is it because he can take that protein that you were talking about? Is it because he can get that nice haircut? And Martha's going to be real stoked when he comes home and she's going to be like, man, George, you're looking hot today.
Yeah.
Is
Okay.
it like what is going to impact that, in that space directly for consumers right now? So that's part of what we do is we focus so heavily on the technology that will solve problems. But as a good consumer, you don't give a shit about that tech. You don't care. What you care
Mhm.
about is the problem that is being solved. How is this thing that you're talking about all the time going to solve my problems? And the things you mentioned, yes, chemically, it's an impossibility to make a steak that has 50% of calories and twice as much protein, because the protein is where the calories are coming from. But
You're right. Isn't it
the
like 4 calories per gram or something like
yes,
that? I don't know.
yeah. So there's if you had twice as much protein, but there is some bioavailability argument, things like that. So
Yeah.
you were kind of on the right track in that space. But the native grasses was the important part of what you were talking, or the most I guess aggressive part of what you were talking about. Right now, that would require a climate level simulation in order to figure
Mhm.
that out, or experimentation, just plant the grass, see what happens. With a climate level simulation, you could figure out what would make the native grasses come back and what would happen over a significant period of time. Can we run those sims now? No, no, the
Mm.
math is too big. We
Right.
can't even begin to simulate the whole environment. Um, there are micro simulations. Oh, we can simulate the whole universe and stuff like that, but it's not the whole universe. It's not down to the atomic level. It's not, and mathematically, even a quantum computer would balk at those levels of computation. But could it simulate a specified environment looking at every variable that is present in the atmosphere, including all over the whole Earth at that point? Yeah, I'd probably do something like that in a few days. Whereas right now it would take 500 years of all our
Wow.
computers doing all that work to process something at that level. So that's where you start seeing some substantial changes when some real smart people who are trying to solve really hard problems look at this and say, we have a model that could do this, but the math is so big that there's no way we can solve it. We can figure out how to grow corn 30% faster with a 50% higher yield in an environment without this many minerals in the dirt. And we can figure out which minerals to add to make this happen in an environment that doesn't have good dirt. I was okay, how do we do that? Well, let's run it on a quantum computer for 2 days. And it comes back and says, this is the minerals in this amount, in this space, over this time, with this much water, and you will get this much yield in this way. And they do that, and the results are proven. You've literally changed the world. with quantum technology. So the assumption is that possible? Absolutely. We already know it's possible, but we don't have the mathematical abilities or the compute cycles that's readily available for people to be able to do that work, which would then make a difference in George and Martha's life because maybe the cost of corn, so that they can make some real good cornbread. And I'm a huge fan of cornbread. So if we can make cornbread cheaper, I'm all about that. If we can make some real good cornbread and it's like this is going to cost us $5 less, it's easier for them to feed their family and to
Right.
have impactful time with their family instead of having to spend that extra hour at work every night. George come home, take care of his knee, still do meaningful work, still stack the board,
Mhm.
still spend time with his family, still do all of these traditional things that culture has decided they want to do and individuals have decided they want to do within that culture, and achieve so much more because of the resources that are available on a commercial level across a number of different verticals because of this stuff happening in the background. So that's where we'll see huge differences. You're not going to have a phone that's going to have a quantum computer in it. Because honestly, at that point, by the time we got this all figured out, there's probably something wired into your head.
Right.
It's so that, but will it be attached and talk to your brain? No, because you have good security controls. Otherwise, somebody's going to rickroll the shit out of your hallucination. And you're going to see Rick Astley videos projected over your news for the whole life.
Trying to take like a test in class, and you're just
Right.
people are
It's just
hacking,
like,
you're
yeah,
airdropping to your Neuralink.
you're just sitting there, you're like taking a test, and you're like, oh man, what started the War of 1812? And Rick Astley's going to be like, because I never gave you up, and that's going to be it. So it's those things. Obviously there's
Mhm,
problems associated with that, but those are the problems you incrementally solve with
mhm,
technology. You don't have this giant flash in the pan. You don't have this is the biggest thing we've ever done. This is I am so tired of seeing that, both in United States politics right now and
mhm.
in technology. This is the greatest scandal we've ever seen. No, it's not. Shut up. You ever see Watergate? So it's like, I mean, so when you think about, although some things now are way worse than that, but the same thing with technology. When people say this is the greatest technological innovation we've ever made, fuck you. You know what's the greatest technological innovation? Penicillin. At that
Yeah,
point, you start talking to me.
yeah,
Malaria vaccine. Let's talk about that. Let's how many millions of lives have been saved by this work.
mhm,
Oh, this is going to change the future. I don't know. I haven't seen it yet. I haven't seen Facebook save 10 million lives. I haven't seen Facebook stop infections.
mhm.
Let's see what penicillin did. Again, now in Mark Zuckerberg's defense, he hasn't said that Facebook is going to change humanity. He's just made a lot of money and got a broad.
Invented cyberbullying, though. No, I'm sure.
Yes,
I'm joking. For the record, I'm not saying Mark Zuckerberg,
Mark
invented
Zuckerberg, no.
cyberbullying.
Cyberbullying is just the evolution of regular bullying, which we all know was invented by Shane's
Yeah,
ancestors.
yeah,
So,
yes, yes. My
so
corn-fed cattle baron.
yes, yes, the ultimate bully. Um,
Yes.
so the incremental change is the healthier change. The incremental change is the change that sticks. The incremental change is the one that affects the most lives. It's not the flashiest. It's not the one that's going to be the red dress on the red carpet, the Louboutin shoes and the Versace bag. That's not what it's going to be. It's the everyday coming into work, driving the Toyota Camry, making the difference. Like those are the changes that are going to change lives and change history, not the big grandiose bullshit grandstanding, standing up on the stage saying, I'm the greatest of all time. Put your money where your mouth is. So all these companies that are out there saying, we're going to change the world, shut me up, change the world. Let me see it
Right.
happen. Until then, go back to fucking work, get it done.
Mhm. Well, I think that's a great place to wrap. Basically, quantum computing's sick. As of right now, it doesn't actually really mean anything for you and I. But soon enough, there may be a world where the convergence of AI, nuclear fusion technology, and quantum computing have all but revolutionized the way we live our lives. And when that day happens, man, it might have happened so slow we didn't even notice.
That's right.
Perfect. All right, guys. We'll catch you next time.